Welcome back to The Outright Effect, a podcast in which unique perspectives challenge us to be better versions of ourselves. We're two ambitious women who like to talk about how to stretch our creativity and work on self-growth to become better people. I'm Tempsy.
And I'm Shelly. And today we're going to be going through some interesting questions or funny, whatever you want to call it. I was honestly just scrolling around. I think it was on Facebook and came across an article where I guess people write into this woman and ask her all kinds of random questions that go on in their workplaces, and she writes back to them. So this, I think it would be considered a blog, but it's called Ask a Manager. It's at askamanager.org. Tempsy and I went through and found some questions that we thought might be interesting to discuss. And we had, some interesting thoughts about these questions and answers that were written in about as well.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to go through and choose the topics that we discussed.
Yeah, there are tons on the website. I mean, I went back to earlier of 2021, and it looks like this blog has been going on for maybe a few years now. So there's definitely quite a huge archive of items, and she seems to respond to these questions on a daily basis and sometimes combines maybe, 3 to 5 or so different topics in one blog post. So as you can imagine, over the course of a year, doing this throughout, like regularly throughout the week and answering a few questions every single time, there's quite a library of things. And so we just kind of dug through, picked some things that stood out. There's definitely, I mean, if you're interested in checking it out on your own, there's definitely a lot of those like, oh my gosh, like, is that really happening? You know what I mean? There's those kinds of topics. But then there's also some like super relevant questions or thoughts that people have out there, probably applying to most of us, So yeah, we thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure.
So this blog is run by Ask a Manager. Her name is Allison Green. And just kind of glancing at her about section, it looks like she did a bunch of HR and management stuff for a particular organization that she worked for. And yeah, she says here she's not a perfect manager. She's made a lot of mistakes, learned a lot of things. And her purpose of this is just to offer insight into how, both sides may think about what's going on in the workplace.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this. Let's get into the first one. So this one is my company is way too positive, and it's essentially talking about how the company is highlighting positive things that everybody's doing every day. You're amazing, you're important, and just illuminating so much positivity. And this person calls it skin crawlingly positive. So what do you think about that, Shelly?
So I just thought it was kind of funny. She also says that she loves where she works and the people that she works with, but this whole thing about praising everyone nonstop kind of gets to her. And so I can kind of see where this person is coming from. I was trying to imagine myself in this individual's shoes experiencing this, and I personally I would be uncomfortable.
Right.
Like, why are you praising me so much? So Allison writes back and basically says that, and this is the part where I feel like I agree, sometimes over the top praise can come across as insincere, and it's sort of like diluting real praise. Genuinely giving someone positive feedback and how great they did at something or how helpful it was. If you're constantly saying that every single day, I think, the meaning of being appreciative and thankful and telling someone that something was so great goes away, or it kind of like, it's not as highlighted as much. Someone could potentially walk away thinking like, oh my God, everything I do is so great. I'm just great all around.
It loses its effect, right? Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
I agree. And not every team or every person on a team is perfect and awesome and wonderful. Like not every aspect of a job is perfect, wonderful, and awesome. And so I think when you give feedback, and this is kind of a well-known thing, is that you have to be specific about your feedback. You can't just say, you're amazing and you're valued and you're important to us. You have to give specific reasons, this specific project that you worked on and what you did with it and the outcome of it and going into specifics of what that project is and how that person contributed and how they made it a success is more genuine than just straight up saying somebody's important.
Right.
You've got to
Hmm.
explain to them why they're important and give them more insights into how you're truly feeling. But if you're just throwing out compliments left and right, that person just may not feel over time, they're not going to feel it's as genuine and that it's really having to do with something that they've contributed.
And it might make people who, like, let's say if you're new to this kind of work environment and maybe you came from a place that I don't want to say didn't give a lot of praise as though there was none given, but not to like this extent where it's like every single day, all day long. Oh my God, you're so awesome, right? You may come into this new environment where they are doing that and be like, what is going on here?
Yeah,
Right? It might
exactly.
like, and that's where I feel like the title comes in. Like, my company is skin crawlingly positive. Like, somebody might feel that way coming in, like, I mean, why? Like, why do we need to be just praising everybody left and right about, like, oh my gosh, I don't know, typed a sentence. You're so amazing. You put a period at the end of your sentence. Oh my goodness. And I think it takes a certain type of person to actually feel comfortable in this workplace. Probably a bunch of cheerleaders, not like stereotyping cheerleaders, but like just being like cheerful and, like that kind of vibe in general. Like, maybe they thrive in here, but that doesn't mean everybody else is going to feel like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is like the best thing to do. I can kind of see where the company might be coming from with, if this is like their culture and the environment that they have fostered, they want people to feel like maybe welcomed, or maybe that makes others come across as more approachable because they're so happy or, thankful, or whatever the case might be. But I agree with Allison that it's kind of devaluing real praise, kind of makes things feel diluted. And I think, to some degree, someone might question themselves, like, am I really right? Like, am I
Right.
really doing some great thing? Like, is it? And then let's say they move on to somewhere else, another company, or they happen to be working with a different department that maybe doesn't react this way. They could really question what they have been doing. Am I bringing value? I don't know. That other department seemed to think I was like so awesome every single day, and like I'm not getting that anymore.
And on the flip side, it could blow somebody's brain up, meaning they could get a big head about themselves and think they're the greatest person in the world. And then when they get a new manager, they go to a new place, they're flabbergasted at the fact that they're getting constructive feedback. Like
True.
it could really mess them up. So I do think genuine positive feedback is important, but also constructive feedback and feedback addressing negative behavior or things that can be improved are also equally important, you
Hmm.
know. And I
Hmm.
also think I don't think there's anything wrong with the company being more on the positive side. I just think it needs to come from a genuine place. And I also think that if you as a company build a culture around positivity and you don't assess or consider the different ways that people receive appreciation, right? Like not the love languages, but the professional ways of appreciation, like affirmation, like words of affirmation. Some people like gifts. Some people like, words of affirmation is essentially what this is, right? You're saying, oh my gosh, you're
Hmm.
amazing, you're wonderful. But some people actually appreciate acts of service or gifts above positive feedback. And that's how they feel valued. And so it's not a one pronged culture to be striving
Yeah.
for.
Right, right. And someone could feel rewarded or know that they did a good job because maybe now they have more autonomy. They're able to work on a more complex project, something more difficult because of the other thing that they did so great, you know?
Exactly.
So yeah, there's definitely different ways to go about recognizing others rather than just saying it constantly all day long.
Yeah. So I get that. I get that this is skin crawling positivity, borderline, like maybe even toxic positivity, right? Because it's not.
Yeah, right, right. All right, let's move on to the next one here, where the question is, are employees obligated to speak up when they're unhappy? Do you have a duty to give your employer a chance to fix things before you leave? And I think that this question came in with the intent that someone is trying to leave their job. And Tempsy and I basically thought that this question, employees being obligated to speak up when they're unhappy could come in at different levels of that. You don't have to be like, I'm out the door already, I'm trying to get out of here. Maybe you bring this up at an earlier time. That's kind of how we were sort of
Looking
thinking
at it.
about this
Yeah.
question in general.
Yeah, and I think giving feedback is super important, even if it's from the bottom up, for many reasons. And there's also a lot of variables, right, to consider. For example, if you trust your manager or not, if you feel like they're open to feedback or not, if they even have the ability to facilitate change or not. Those are all factors that have to be considered. But either way, you voicing or expressing constructive feedback, right? Like not coming in whining about everything and not having a suggested solution. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about providing constructive feedback, meaning that you have maybe some idea of a solution. And regardless if that person has the ability to make that change or not, it is my opinion that it's important to provide feedback all throughout your time with that company, especially if you enjoy working there. And the reason I say that is because if things continue to build that are frustrating to you, maybe inconsistencies with the way people do things, maybe it's duplicative efforts, maybe, whatever the case might be, that is going to weigh on you over time. And if you continue to get more and more frustrated by it, it's going to start to build resentment, and resentment leads to burnout. And so the earlier you start giving feedback in a constructive and professional way that kind of provides the opportunity for growth and these things to get fixed, then I think it's definitely worth doing, regardless if you truly believe that a change will be made. But you also have to emotionally prepare yourself for that change not necessarily to be made, right? Because some
Mhm.
things can't always be fixed with the snap of a finger, and there are different obstacles in the way. So I do think for the most part, you should give feedback, but you shouldn't be pestering everybody to make a change. If at some point you're told, okay, your feedback was considered and we appreciate you bringing it to our attention, but there are reasons why it can't be done. Here they are, 1, 2, 3, here are the reasons. And you got to just let that go, because it'll weigh on you over time. So, I
Mhm.
mean, it's hard to answer this so succinctly because there are just so many different ways it could go. And you have to emotionally prepare yourself, right? Because you could be disappointed. It could cause frustration. So, but I do think it's worth giving the feedback, even if you don't think that a huge change is going to be made. What are your thoughts, Shelly?
Yeah, I think it depends on a variety of different things, obviously. So, sometimes people feel, I don't know, I guess inclined to speak up in general, right? Like you might just be that person who's like, I just got to get it off my chest. I just got to tell somebody about it. And then there are also people who are on the flip side of that who are just like, well, I'm just going to suck it up and deal with it, or whatever the case might be. Maybe perhaps it's tolerance level, and perhaps it's like how confrontational, not that,
Yeah.
confrontation has to be bad, right? But it could be some level of that too. Like someone may feel very like, no, but I just got to tell somebody. Like I'm unhappy and I got to tell somebody. So I think, that definitely plays into this scenario as well. And when I'm looking at the response from Ask Manager, she says that two things perhaps one might consider before talking with a manager about what's making an individual unhappy enough to consider leaving is if things are fixable, if they were fixed, if you would then stay. And I think that's definitely something that should be taken into consideration as well. Because I would say for me personally, I'm probably somebody who would mention something that's not making me happy. Because, if I were new to a job, been there for a while, like being there, I'm trying to help myself, right? It's like a method of like, helping your own situation, and what can you do? Speak up about it, and definitely come with solutions. And if you think like, oh yeah, I can definitely see this being fixed, or like this is reasonable or something like that, there chances are there's somebody else out there who thinks it's also fixable and reasonable as well. So why not, perhaps get that one little thing out of the way. Like if you mention like, hey, this thing is really inefficient, it's not working. I think we can do this and this and this instead to make it a lot better for me. It'll take me a lot less time, blah, 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 blah. Like talk about the benefits, right? And the response might be like, oh yeah, no, that's totally true. Actually, like you're the one who knows it best. do whatever you want with it, essentially, right? Like fix it in the best way you see it can be done. And there, you've just saved yourself a lot of headache,
Right.
right? On the flip side, if you're like, oh, we're just talking here, right? Like, oh, the CEO said X, Y, and Z. Like, I don't align with that. Well, like, how long is that CEO staying there, right? If it's forever, I don't know. Like, that's the question. Are things fixable?
Right. Yeah. And
If it's someone's direction, right? Like someone at like a very high level, their direction, and it's not like, let's say it's ethical, it's totally reasonable, and it's just something that a person doesn't agree with, maybe it may not change, right? Like
it likely
everything
won't.
is, yeah, it likely won't. Like it's just like, I don't know. I don't know what it could be. I can't even think of like a potential example, but like let's say it's like it's totally legit, right? If the CEO is like, yep, no, this is our direction, it's totally legit. I mean, if that person, the CEO, is planning to stay there forever, is it going to change? Probably not.
Yeah, and that's a
um,
misalignment of values, right? And in that
mhm.
case, you're welcome to express your opinion and how you feel to your manager, but if it's not going to
Realize
change
that
anything,
it might
yeah.
just stay as that at that, right? Like,
And then you can start
and
looking for another job if that doesn't align with your goals and what you're looking, how you're looking to contribute to a company. That's totally fine. And I do
right,
think that it's worth speaking up about just so that people are prepared. Because one of the things in this blog post was that the person who submitted the question said, I wish, why didn't that person bring those things up, earlier? And so if you're bringing a misalignment of values up to your manager, at least they're not going to be shocked. Not that it matters whether they're shocked or not that you're leaving. Of course, hopefully you'll be providing a reasonable amount of time of notice. So I don't think it really matters, but I don't think that the manager would be like, oh, I wish you would have brought this up earlier because it's nothing that can be changed anyway.
right, right,
That's a
right. And
different situation.
yeah, and the person who's writing in says that they enjoyed their time working at the company, but they don't see any long-term potential. So moving on just makes sense.
Right.
And, sometimes it's just that. Uh, and it's totally fine to start like looking for another job or whatever. And I think sometimes that just helps when someone might be leaving and a reason is asked, like, oh, is there anything we could have done? No, I just think my opinions are different or whatever the case, something just doesn't align here and like be on your merry way. So
But I also
yeah.
think that if, because one of the things that was mentioned was whether or not it's something that could be fixed. And if you're on your way out, then I think it's worth bringing up if you can bring it up in a professional and constructive way. I think it's worth bringing up just in case it might help somebody who's currently working there. I'm not talking about a misalignment of values here. I'm talking about a process change or maybe a leader within the company that's not, really acting in the way that the culture typically dictates or the kind of behavior that the culture typically drives, then it's worth bringing up because others who you have built relationships at that job with, they might benefit from your providing feedback. Even if you think it may not change anything, if your words might support positive change in some way, shape, or form, I do think it's worth bringing up, unless it's going to cause you more pain personally inside you, right? Like if it's going to cause you more stress and anguish and anxiety to bring those things up and really get your voice heard, then it's not worth it because there's no reason to put yourself through something like that if it's going to affect you in such a negative way to help somebody else. Really is no skin off your back to provide that feedback, then I think you should because it could help somebody, right?
And so I'm reading part of the response in here as well, and it kind of said like, if you're not willing to bring problems up to someone who can make a change about it, then you end up perhaps complaining to others, just complaining about it, right?
Right.
And here it says, if your boss and director are saying, if only so and so had told us they were unhappy, we could have made it better, then it's kind of legit. Like, they maybe could have fixed the situation and made it better. So yeah, I can see. where I feel like it just kind of depends on the situation and like what's going on, but there's definitely like two things that can come out, or probably more things, but
Yeah.
like, there's a variety of different ways to approach it. But I mean, I do feel like if it is something that could potentially change, it is fixable, it's reasonable to ask for, or whatever the case might be. Like, hey, I don't know, the A key on my keyboard is broken and it's just been making me really mad. Can I just get a new one? Like, I'm and if like, oh my gosh, I just never thought to ask for one and it's making me so upset, I'm about to quit about it. And the manager's like, oh my God, I could have just gotten you a new keyboard and we would have been all fine and great. Like, why wouldn't
Yep.
you bring that up? Right.
Yep. And if
Yeah.
you're a leader, it's important to ask for specifics, because
Hmm.
as a leader at a previous company, I didn't ask for specifics on one instance, and it was such a minor thing that could have been fixed. And me and my superior didn't even ask that simple question of, for instance, let's just say it was like about pay, right? Well, how much more do you need? Like some simple question like that. And if the person came back and was like, oh, 25 cents more would have been fine, then you're like shooting
Right.
yourself in the foot because you had that one person that would have been happy with 25 cents more an hour?
Right.
But the other thing I'll say is one thing that always drives me to speak up, because I am a truly introverted person, but I'm also somebody who tries to fight for others who don't typically fight for themselves, or protect others, I should say, is a better way to explain it. Is silence is a vote. You're voting for something when you're staying silent. So if you're not willing to speak up, then I would say then you can't really complain. Like you shouldn't
Hmm.
really complain, because then you're going to bring others down around you, and it's going to cause more
Hmm.
problems. And then even if you do speak up, but you're given legitimate reasons as to why it can't change, I would urge you to accept that and try not to bring others down around you, because when you go to that negative place, it just spreads like a wildfire, and it's more important to build one another up and support one another on your team than to sit there and be negative and tear the company down, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And if you enjoy working there, it's worth staying positive in a respectful and healthy way, right? Not toxic positivity, but if your item was addressed, then move on. Don't let it get you into a deep dark place where you're constantly negative and bringing others down around you.
Totally.
All right. Well, that was a fun one. So this next one is when your company hosts a holiday Zoom cocktail hour, and it's at say 7 p.m. and you have a family, and it's something that will kind of interrupt your family life or be very difficult because maybe you're living in a smaller house or whatever, and your family might be interrupted by it. Is that something that you really need to attend? And in this case, what this person, this is that basically the exact situation of what the person wrote in. And they're not in a senior level position, and they're a financial analyst, and their day is typically from 7:30 to 5. And the manager basically called them out for not attending the previous year, saying it just didn't look good. It was a bad look. And I think there are two sides to this, in my opinion, is that I don't think any manager should be putting somebody down for not attending something that is outside of work hours and is probably not promoted as required. But I have had this situation in the past where companies do a lot of events and they want you to attend all of them. In this case, this was one event and it happened once a year. And so my opinion is, regardless of how the manager handled it, because I don't think they should have handled it that way. I don't think they should say, "Oh, that was a bad look for you not to come," right? That's not right. But on the employee's side, I do feel like attending these types of things does help build a rapport with other people. It's an opportunity to, depending on how it's structured and who plans it and how they planned it, right? If you have the opportunity to actually connect with people, they send you out into breakout rooms and stuff like that, and you have a smaller group of people that you can connect with. I think that's beneficial. I think that kind of can energize you for a little bit, depending on the type of personality you have. And it can help you connect with people you never had connected with before. And you're talking about things outside of work rather than work related items that you're constantly talking about all the time. I have a family, and if there is one day out of the year where my company has this Zoom cocktail hour, holiday Zoom cocktail hour that they're inviting me to, I'm just being honest here, I would talk to my family and say, hey, there's this thing that I want to go to for work. Let's kind of plan or solve to be able to handle it really well as a family, right? Work around it, whatever we need to do to make sure that I can be at this holiday cocktail party, right? That's just how I would do it, because I do want to show up to these kinds of things. I do want to connect with people, and hopefully it's been set up in a way that that's possible. But I also think this one comes with other variables, right? Do you even like the people that you work with? Are you on it? Is it the whole company, or is it just your team? How big is your company and your team? There are other variables. So mine's just a general answer as to how I would come. What do you think, Shelly?
Yeah, so when I was reading this one, I couldn't understand why it was 7 o'clock at night. I felt like that was kind of late. Like what, like I would imagine that if this was in person and everybody was like working in the office, if you work 7:30 to 5, you would probably be heading to that thing, that event somewhere at a restaurant or wherever the venue is, probably soon after 5. Maybe it
Right.
starts at 5:30 or 6 or something like that. So saying that it starts at 7, I was kind of like, why is it so late? Because then you're thinking, okay, well, this thing is at least going for an hour, like a Zoom thing, an hour. If it was in person, probably longer, right? Hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. Like that to me, I was just kind of like, why isn't it starting at 5:30 or 6 or something like that? Anyways, that was my immediate thought. And in looking at the response that was posted in this particular article, she kind of mentions like, it's kind of BS for boss to hang it over their heads so much that they didn't attend last time, which I agree. I feel like there should be a little bit more flexibility. It is something that is outside of working hours. And that was also something that was mentioning here as well. If employers really want full participation, they should schedule these events during the day, was part of the response. And I agree with that. When it's scheduled during the day, you almost have like no excuse not to go because it's like, it'd be during lunchtime, or if you're there in person, you'd be like walking down the hallway to like a conference room or whatever the case might be. And I feel like that's kind of how I am accustomed to holiday parties. We'd all go somewhere for lunch, in the past, something like that, or have it on site in like a larger area of the building that we're working in. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that. Personally, I am not a party individual, so I try to get out of these as much as I can. And not that I would purposely not go without a reason, because like I don't have kids. Like nobody in my family cares if I'm going to this party or not, virtually or in person. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I don't have any disruptions. I don't have any obligations at 7 o'clock. For me personally, if it was starting at 7, aside my personal preference, but strictly looking at my schedule, I should have no problem going to this,
Right.
really. Like, okay, feed the dog. He eats before 7, not a big deal. But yeah, I mean, I just feel like just like reading through this and thinking on like a personal level, like would I want to be going to something out of my way at 7 o'clock? To me, that just kind of feels a little bit too late, especially like, is this in the middle of the week? Because if you're expected to like, start it all over again, this person starts work at 7:30, like why, again, my question is, why does it have to start at 7? I feel bad for this person. They're starting before 8 o'clock, give them a break, let them get some rest. Don't you want them to be productive the next day as well? Maybe it might be a different story if this was a Friday, in my opinion. And I do kind of feel like for me, going to any of these things, it half is to like show face, honestly, and like be a little bit like participative. I don't know if that's even a word, but like participate in the event, like. And I guess like with the way that I'm going into this, I'm not thinking anything in particular. Like I'm not thinking I need to go because of obligations. Like that doesn't really cross my mind. I mean, I know like showing face kind of is like leaning into that category, but I'm not thinking that anyone is like talking bad about me if I don't. Like I don't feel that kind of like additional pressure, but I'm also not going there to get something out of it. This is not, to me, this is not a networking event where I'm meeting with a bunch of strangers and I need to get my name out there. So I don't really see it as like I need to be like the most talkative person on the planet when I'm there either. Like I'm just kind of there. And if I happen to talk to somebody, great. If I don't, then whatever. I don't feel like I have any strong feelings about that anyway. Maybe I'm like ultra introvert.
I
I don't
guess
actually think
so.
I actually think I don't care.
Yeah,
That's really what I feel like it boils down to. Like I'm not going there thinking like somebody's gonna think Shelly's like this or that because she didn't do XYZ. Like I don't care what those people are thinking. I'm just showing up as myself and how I want to be while I'm there. And so, but I would say, this is a Zoom party they're talking about here.
right,
I would say that I hope whoever arranged this scheduled something fun, because if somebody already felt like I don't really want to go, don't make them
yeah,
feel like that more.
right,
You know what I mean? Like don't make them confirm, yeah, see, why did I even show up?
right,
This was a
yeah,
drag or whatever, like I hope something fun is going on and I hope they get something out of it. And I do feel like, regardless if this were a Zoom party or in person, if somebody needs to leave, nobody should make them stay. Like, let
right,
them go home, right? Like, whatever the case might be, maybe they're not feeling well, maybe they do have to take care of something at home. Like, you don't know what's going on for them in general, you know what I mean? So if they're like, hey, I gotta go, and it's like, 30 minutes in or whatever the case might be, like, hey, cool, thanks for coming, right? Hope you had a good time while you're here. See you at work tomorrow or Monday or whenever next
right.
time is. And I mean, call it a day.
I think I'm on the opposite end is where like I don't necessarily think about what I'm gonna get out of going or like what the benefit is, not when I'm initially thinking about going, right? And my
Hmm.
inclination is to go. I definitely want to attend. Whereas you were saying, it's not necessarily I'm super stoked about. I'm just kind of indifferent. Like, okay, I'll go to show, save face, whatever. But for me, I do think there is a benefit, even though I'm not thinking about it initially. I do think there is a benefit to going to those types of things. Again, as long as it's coordinated and structured well. While I'm not an extroverted person, I do think there is a benefit to networking with the people that you work with and talking to them about things outside of work because it helps you build relationships. It's not like you're looking for best friends, but if you build a relationship with somebody at whatever degree, right? In my opinion, I feel like you earn a little bit more trust, you can get a little bit more connected, and you could work with that person better down the road if there's a project you want to work on or a project that you're asked to work on with somebody that you were able to have a conversation with at the party, the virtual party, then I think that that ends up being a good thing. So I think going there to benefit from what that event might provide, I think is helpful. I think it's good.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
if you don't see that, that's okay. And I think it
Yeah.
should be okay. I don't think managers should pressure you to go. If you don't feel like going, then you don't feel like going. I don't think that should be a requirement of the job, but I would urge people to go. Like, I think the things that you can get out of it outweigh anything else, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. And I guess for me, like that just doesn't cross my mind. I'm not saying like I'm thinking, oh, why would I go because I'm not gonna make connections or I don't value those
Right.
connections? I feel like the connection part doesn't even cross my mind. I'm just like my thought is, am I going or am I not going? And it kind of stops there. Like, do I want to go or do I not want to go? Or how
Right.
long do I stay? And I'm not thinking about like, oh, because so and so's there and I really should talk to them about X, Y, and Z, or like so I can like get to know so and so better just in case. Like those things don't even like occur to me. I feel like for me, that's more like organic, right? Like if
Right.
I happen to go, like if I end up going, which probably would, right? And if I happen to talk to somebody, whoever that might be, then great. And if like we become better friends out of that, then fantastic. But like that does not cross my mind with attending anything, period.
Right.
Like I don't go in thinking like I'm trying to build relationships. I'm not saying I'm not trying to build relationships, but I definitely don't go into thinking like, oh, I should go to this so I could get to know so and so better. That definitely does not cross my mind at all.
Regardless of what time it's at, right? If it's
Yeah,
5 o'clock.
regardless of what time it's at, it's like the thing you're going to, I feel like sometimes maybe I am more like execution driven and that is above anything else.
Right.
It's like, we're going to be working on this project together. Well, we just got to get it done. Yeah, we're working on the project, period. We're
Yeah.
not here to like and I think through that, like, if you happen to talk about whatever else might be going on, oh my God, this really funny thing happened to me right on my way to this meeting, or whatever the case might be, you start talking about that, then, great. But yeah, I definitely don't keep any, like, I'll call them pickup lines for this scenario, but I don't keep any of that like in my back pocket to like pull out to start conversations about whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
to me, it's just kind of like whatever is happening. I don't know, being present. I have no idea what to call it.
So what if you didn't like your coworkers? So let's say you got an invite for this. Everybody in the company is going, but you don't like your immediate coworkers like on your team.
Like all of them.
Yeah.
I guess that's my question. Then I probably wouldn't go, and I wouldn't care about, like, just what I was saying. I wouldn't care about like, oh, Shelly didn't come, blah blah blah. Like, I wouldn't like go talk about it, whatever. I don't care. That's totally fine. I mean, people are entitled to their opinions. Meanwhile, like, I mean, if someone's thinking that, someone else is thinking something about you too,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
call it even, right? I think that's a question. Like, if I were to not like all of my coworkers, and if I went, what am I getting out of that? You know, I
Even if
feel
it was
like
the
there
whole
are,
company going?
well, I mean, my question was if everyone going there I didn't like, right?
Oh, no, no. So if you had a team, like say there's 5 on the team, 6 with you, and you didn't like any of the 5 people on your team, but the
Mhm.
whole company was going and there's, 300 in the company, would you still go?
Yeah, if I had people that I knew out of the other 290 whatever, right?
Right.
That and I was friends with one of them, I would go and probably hang out with them instead, honestly.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
agree.
Mhm.
But if you don't like anybody, it's like, "Okay,
Why am I
well."
going?
And
Yeah.
that's another
But
thing,
then, I
right?
mean,
You need to
yeah,
start
that's
looking.
another question. Why are you there? If you don't like everybody there, why are you there? But I mean, I would definitely say I've been in situations where there were companies that had a particular liking to parties, right? Like, they were often and frequent, and for a lot of people, maybe too much, too often, right? Taking away too much time, whether that be your personal time, like for you to just sit at home and watch Netflix, or your family time where you're like taking care of, your family members, children, whoever that might be. Sometimes I feel like there are companies that like they're like hyper social. I don't know what else to call it, right? Like, they're like
Right.
having events like constantly. And some people have time for that and the capacity to do that. Other people do not. And I think
Yeah.
it just depends.
One of the companies I was at is similar, and I heard from other leaders within the company that they would be disappointed if you didn't go and you were a leader. And one of them was like on the weekend. I mean, you could bring
Hmm.
your whole family. That they were very,
Open to that. Yeah.
yeah, like this one event, they would allow everybody to bring their family because it was probably because it was on a weekend. And I heard that there was some pressure. And I've also been at companies where they pressure you to contribute to a charitable campaign, right?
Hmm.
Like they have this one nonprofit that they're supporting and want to
For the
give
year
money.
or whatever.
Yeah, they do it, say once a year, and the leadership would like pressure you to contribute. And it's like, well, I have my own charitable companies that I've done research on and am contributing to. And I feel like my charitable contributions are good enough. It didn't matter. It
Hmm.
was like a competition or something like that,
Hmm.
which I don't think is right. I think you should be able to contribute if you want to and not if you don't want to.
Yeah. And I mean, also because of outside of that, it's like, how much is someone's mortgage or bills or other financial obligations? Like, charity is, I mean, it's important to contribute to other, community things, but if you're doing it so much where you can't pay your
Pay
own
your
bills,
bills.
there's some, evaluation needed perhaps.
Yep, very
Hmm.
true. Oh man, Shelly, we're running out of time, and I really wanted to talk about this employee who's not flushing the toilet. So all I say is, folks, you gotta flush the toilet. I don't care what you do in there, you gotta flush it, please. We won't go
And
into
if
the
it's not
whole.
working, let somebody know.
Thank you. Don't put somebody in a situation where they have to give you that feedback. And the same goes for dressing appropriately. You know, when you look in the mirror, if you're dressed appropriately, do not make your manager have to have that conversation with you, because that is the worst.
Oh dear. All right, that's it for us here on this episode. If you found these questions intriguing and you'd like to read more, check out askamanager.org, where you can find a wide library of various questions being asked. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Outright Effect. You can find us at theoutrighteffect.com. Follow us on our social media accounts on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, all at The Outright Effect. You can also reach out to us by emailing us at theoutrighteffect@gmail.com. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.